A heartbroken maid used her billionaire boss's test credit card to buy medicine for a sick stranger, unaware it was him in disguise. You have 1 hour and one rule. Buy whatever you feel is most important. The rain hammered down on the glass of the sterile boardroom window, a relentless, pounding rhythm that matched the frantic thudding in Alara's own chest. Each drop that splattered and slid down the pane felt like a tiny, cold accusation, mirroring the chill of fear that had taken root deep within her soul. She stood in a line with 3 other women. The cavernous room was a study in cold, modern wealth, all polished marble and gleaming steel, a world away from the threadbare carpets and peeling paint of her tiny apartment. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and unspoken competition, a stark contrast to the familiar smell of antiseptic and her son's gentle breathing that usually filled her senses. She clutched the crisp, impossibly sleek black credit card in her trembling hand, its weight feeling both sacred and profane, a symbol of a power she could never comprehend. The card was cold, so very cold. The man who had given it to them, Mr. Harrison, the enigmatic billionaire's right-hand man, had spoken in a monotone, his eyes sweeping over them with detached curiosity, lingering on Alara for a fraction of a second with something that might have been pity, or perhaps just dismissal. She was the 4th woman, the anomaly, the maid summoned from the downstairs corridors to stand beside society heiresses and ambitious executives. A control group, a variable. She knew it. The other women, dressed in impeccable designer suits, radiated a confidence that felt like a physical force, their gazes sharp and assessing. Veronica, the one with the severe black dress and a cruel twist to her crimson lips, had already scoffed audibly when Alara was called forward, a soft, sharp sound that had splintered the heavy silence of the room. Alara's worn but clean uniform suddenly felt like a costume of shame, its fabric thin and inadequate against the sheer weight of their judgment. Her heart ached with a familiar, hollow pain, the ghost of 1,000 similar slights. She was invisible, less than. She thought of her son, Leo, the image of his small, pale face, his chest struggling for each breath during his last asthma attack, flashed behind her eyes with the searing brightness of a lightning strike. The doctor's words echoed in her ears, a quiet, clinical litany of expenses. A better nebulizer, specialist appointments, stronger medication not fully covered by her meager insurance. The numbers had piled up into an insurmountable mountain of debt, a shadow that loomed over every waking moment and haunted her fitful sleep. This card in her hand, this piece of black plastic, was a miracle, a cruel joke, a test she couldn't possibly understand. But the instruction was clear. Buy whatever you feel is most important for her. The answer was as clear and undeniable as the love she felt for her child. It was Leo's health. It was his future. It was the simple, desperate wish to see him run in the park without that terrible, wheezing gasp for air. That was the most important thing in the universe. With a quiet, dignified nod that belied the seismic turmoil in her gut, she clutched the card tighter, the sharp edges digging into her palm. Her resolve hardened. She would not fail this test, not for them, but for him. She would walk to the pharmacy, buy the best nebulizer they had, and maybe, just maybe, she could buy a few days of peace. She could buy a full, easy breath for her son. That was all that mattered. Julian Sterling watched the scene unfold on a series of high-definition monitors in his dimly lit observation room, a sterile sanctuary hidden 2 floors above the boardroom. The heavy fog of grief that had shrouded his life for 3 years felt, for a moment, infinitesimally lighter, replaced by a flicker of academic curiosity. The test was his idea, a cynical experiment born of profound loneliness and a deep-seated distrust of the world he inhabited. Since the accident that had stolen his wife and daughter, his vast fortune had felt like nothing more than a curse, an ornate cage that isolated him from any genuine human connection. Everyone wanted something from him. Their smiles were calculated, their kindness a transaction. He had become a ghost in his own stately life, his heart a hollow, echoing chamber. So he had devised this trial, a way to quantify the human soul, to see if any glimmer of selflessness still existed in the gilded world he was forced to navigate. He had chosen 3 women who were vying for a partnership with his company, women known for their ambition and ruthlessness. And then, on a whim, he had told his assistant to include one of his household staff. He wanted a baseline, control. He had chosen the quiet maid, Ilara, because he had occasionally seen her in the cavernous hallways of his mansion. A fleeting figure with haunted, gentle eyes and a dignity that seemed out of place amidst the polished, empty splendor of his home. He expected her to buy groceries, or perhaps pay a bill. He expected a predictable, small act of self-preservation. He did not expect her to change his world. He watched her on the screen, her small, determined figure walking out of the building, her threadbare coat pulled tight against the biting cold of the wind and rain. He leaned forward, a strange, unspoken tension coiling in his chest. He felt nothing for the other three as they immediately directed their drivers to designer boutiques and luxury car dealerships. Their choices were as predictable as they were disappointing. But Ilara, she was walking. She was walking with a purpose that felt different. He watched her go. The city streets were a blur of shimmering asphalt and hurried, faceless figures under a sea of black umbrellas. The pounding rain had soaked through Ilara's thin coat, and a biting cold seeped into her bones, but she barely noticed. Her mind was a whirlwind of calculations and relief, a fragile hope blossoming in the desolate landscape of her heart. The new nebulizer would be a godsend. Perhaps she could even afford the name-brand medication, the one the pharmacist had said worked faster, the one she'd always stared at on the shelf with a silent, desperate longing. She clutched the credit card in her pocket, its presence a small, solid warmth against her chilled skin. It felt like a talisman, a key to a door she never knew existed. She was so lost in her thoughts, in the quiet, sacred prayer for her son's well-being, that she almost didn't see him. He was huddled in a recessed doorway, a figure made of shadows and misery, his body trembling violently under a soaked, tattered blanket. He was old, his face gaunt and pale, his hair plastered to his skull by the relentless rain. A raw, hacking cough erupted from his chest, a sound so brittle and shattered it seemed to tear through the rhythmic drumming of the downpour. People hurried past, their eyes averted, their faces closed off, each person sealed within their own bubble of concerns. They didn't see him, but Ilara did. She froze. Her heart gave a painful lurch, a sharp, physical pang of empathy that momentarily stole her breath. She saw not a stranger, but a reflection of her own desperation. She saw the same hollow look in his eyes that she often saw in her own reflection, the look of someone hanging on by a single frayed thread. She saw the tremor in his hands and thought of Leo's own small body shaking with fever. The pharmacy was just ahead. The nebulizer. Leo. Her mind screamed at her to keep walking, to ignore this man, to fulfill the one mission that mattered. This was not her burden, but her feet remained rooted to the wet pavement. Her mother's voice, a gentle echo from a kinder past, whispered in her memory. Kindness is the only coin that is never counterfeit. She looked at the frail, shivering man, then down at the pocket where the black card rested. A war raged within her, a seismic clash between a mother's fierce, protective love and a human being's profound, unwavering compassion. She couldn't save the world, but maybe, just for a moment, she could save this one small piece of it. Her quiet resolve, which had been focused solely on her son, now shifted. The decision was made. She approached him slowly, her movements gentle so as not to startle him. "Sir?" she asked, her voice soft against the noise of the city. He looked up, his eyes watery and clouded with fever, and in them, she saw a flicker of surprise, of fear. He expected to be told to move, to be scorned. He did not expect the sincerity in her gaze. "You're unwell," she stated simply. "Let me help you," without waiting for a response. She turned and walked into the pharmacy, not to the aisle with the nebulizers, but directly to the counter. The pharmacist looked at her worn clothes with a skeptical eye as she asked for a broad-spectrum antibiotic, the most expensive kind, and a powerful fever reducer. Then she pointed to a thick, fleece blanket on a display shelf. When she presented the gleaming black credit card, the pharmacist's expression shifted from suspicion to baffled deference. The transaction was approved in a silent flash of green light. She then went to the small cafe next door and bought a large, steaming cup of herbal tea and a warm sandwich. She returned to the doorway, her hands full, her heart pounding a steady, certain rhythm. She knelt before the man, ignoring the dirty rainwater that soaked into the knees of her thin trousers. She wrapped the new, warm blanket around his trembling shoulders, the soft fabric a stark contrast to his soaked, threadbare rags. She pressed the warm tea into his hands and placed the sandwich beside him. She took out a small, worn note from her pocket, one she kept in her wallet, and scribbled a message on the back of a receipt with a tiny pencil. "This too shall pass. Be well." She tucked the note and the box of medicine into his coat pocket. He looked at her, his eyes glistening with unspoken, raw emotion. He tried to speak, but his voice was a broken rasp. A single, hot tear traced a path through the grime on his cheek. She simply gave him a small, sad smile, a gesture of pure, selfless understanding. She had made her choice. She had bought what was most important: humanity. Julian sat in the back of a sleek, black car parked just down the street, his disguise as the frail, sick man now discarded on the seat beside him. He was no longer acting. The trembling he felt was real, a profound internal tremor that originated from the very core of his being. He had watched the entire exchange on a hidden micro-camera, had felt the warmth of the blanket she wrapped around his shoulders, had seen the unwavering sincerity in her gentle eyes. He had orchestrated this whole encounter, placing himself in her path as the ultimate test, expecting her to walk by, just like everyone else. He had wanted to confirm his cynical view of the world, to prove that even the seemingly virtuous would choose their own needs when presented with a choice. He had been so wrong. He watched her walk away, her figure receding into the rain-swept street, her shoulders squared with a dignity that humbled him to his very soul. She had not bought a nebulizer for her sick son. She had not bought herself a new coat or a warm meal. She had used a limitless credit card, a key to any material desire she could imagine, to buy medicine and a blanket for a complete stranger. A stranger who offered her nothing in return. It was an act of such pure, uncalculated kindness that it shattered the thick, cynical ice that had encased his heart for years. It was a light in the profound darkness of his grief. A sob caught in his throat, a raw, unfamiliar sound in the sterile silence of the car. He picked up the small, worn note she had left in his pocket. "This too shall pass. Be well." The simple words, written in a neat, steady hand, felt like a personal prophecy, a message from the universe delivered by the most unlikely of angels. At that moment, he didn't just feel a flicker of interest. He felt a seismic shift, a reawakening. His life, which had been a hollow echo of the past, suddenly had a new, undeniable purpose. He had to find her. He had to know her. He had to protect that pure, gentle light from a world that would surely try to extinguish it. He was no longer a ghost. He was a man with a mission. When Alara returned to the towering Sterling Tower, her heart was a strange mix of calm and trepidation. She had done the right thing. A deep, quiet certainty settled in her soul. But she knew her actions would be incomprehensible to the people who inhabited this world of cold, hard transactions. She was summoned not to the boardroom, but to the office of the house manager, a stern woman named Mrs. Gable whose face seemed permanently etched in lines of disapproval. The black credit card and the pharmacy receipt sat on the polished surface of the desk, a silent testament to her choice. Mrs. Gable's eyes, cold and sharp as chips of ice, flickered from the receipt to Alara's face. The silence deepened. "You were given a unique opportunity, Alara," she began, her voice crisp and devoid of any warmth. "An opportunity to better your situation, to provide for your child. Instead, you chose to squander Mr. Sterling's generosity on a vagrant." The word vagrant was laced with such venomous disdain that Alara winced. She opened her mouth to explain, to speak of the man's desperate condition, of his shattered cough, of the simple human need to help another in pain. But she knew it would be useless. The look on Mrs. Gable's face told her that compassion was a foreign language in this place. "Your employment here is terminated, effective immediately," the woman declared, her words falling like a guillotine. You have misused company property and demonstrated a profound lack of judgment. Please collect your things. Total silence. The blow was devastating, yet not entirely unexpected. Alara felt the familiar, crushing weight of despair settle upon her, but she refused to let it break her. She held Mrs. Gable's unflinching gaze, her own eyes steady and clear. There was no apology in them, no regret, just a quiet, dignified acceptance. She had made her choice, and she would stand by it. She turned and walked out of the office, her back straight, her head held high. The long walk back to the staff locker room felt like a mile. Each step echoed in the cavernous, silent hallways of the mansion, a lonely sound in a world of ornate emptiness. She packed her few belongings into a worn canvas bag. A faded picture of her late husband, a small, hand-drawn card from Leo, her well-used cleaning supplies. As she left the grand estate for the last time, the heavy iron gates closing behind her with a soft, final click, she felt a strange sense of release. She had lost her job, her only source of income, but she had not lost herself. She had not betrayed the quiet, unwavering moral compass that guided her. She stepped back out into the rain, which had softened to a gentle drizzle, and began the long walk home to her son, her future more uncertain than ever, yet her soul strangely, profoundly at peace. She was gone. The days that followed her dismissal bled into a week of quiet, dignified desperation. The small amount of money from her final paycheck dwindled with alarming speed, each dollar spent on rent and simple food feeling like a countdown to disaster. The mountain of Leo's medical bills, which had seemed insurmountable before, now felt like an impassable Everest. Alara spent her days searching for a new job, her worn shoes treading miles of pavement, her gentle voice meeting a chorus of polite but firm rejections. Her lack of recent references and the sudden termination from a high-profile employer cast a shadow of suspicion over her applications. The hope that had blossomed in her heart on the day of the test began to wither, replaced by the familiar, biting cold of fear. Leo, sensitive to his mother's unspoken stress, grew more withdrawn. His asthma seemed to worsen in their damp, small apartment, his small chest rattling with a shallow, wheezing sound that tore at Alara's heart with every breath. She held him close at night, singing soft lullabies in the flickering lamplight, her own stomach clenching with hunger so that he could have the last of the milk and bread. She projected an aura of calm, a steady, unwavering presence for her son. But inside, she was shattering, the pieces held together only by the fierce, desperate strength of her love. She felt utterly, completely alone. But she was not alone. From the shadows, Julian watched over her. After firing her through his manager, a calculated, cruel-to-be-kind act designed to sever her ties to his world and assess her resilience, he had dedicated the full, formidable resources of his empire to tracking her every move. He had private investigators follow her discreetly, their reports painting a heartbreaking picture of her struggle. He sat in his cavernous, silent office late into the night, reading about her fruitless job searches, her dwindling bank account, the worsening of her son's health. A raw, unbearable guilt gnawed at him. He had caused this. His cynical test had thrown her into this abyss. But intertwined with the guilt was a profound, deepening admiration. She never once faltered in her dignity. She never complained, never begged. She faced each new hardship with a quiet resolve that was both heartbreaking and awe-inspiring. He knew he could not simply appear and offer her money. Her pride, the very quality he admired most, would never allow it. He had to intervene from a distance, becoming her secret, hidden savior. One morning, a crisp, official-looking letter arrived in Alara's mailbox. Her hands trembled as she opened it, expecting another final notice. Instead, it was a letter from the hospital's financial aid department, informing her that an anonymous benefactor had paid Leo's entire outstanding medical balance in full. She gasped, her knees going weak with disbelief. It was a miracle, a mistake surely. But when she called the hospital, they confirmed it. The debt was gone. The anonymous acts of kindness continued. A few days later, a large box appeared outside her apartment door containing a state-of-the-art air purification system, the kind she had only dreamed of affording. There was no note, no sender. She plugged it in, and within hours, the air in their small apartment felt cleaner, lighter. Leo's breathing began to ease, the rattling in his chest softening to a soft hush. Then, bags of fresh, organic groceries would appear on her doorstep, warm bread, fresh fruit, high-quality meat and vegetables, enough to last them for a week. Each gift was a mystery, a lifeline thrown from an unseen hand. Alara was bewildered, her practical mind struggling to find a logical explanation. She began to feel a fragile, cautious sense of hope. Someone was watching over them. Some force for good in the universe was answering her silent, desperate prayers. She didn't know it yet, but her guardian angel was a man haunted by his own grief. A man whose shattered heart was slowly, painstakingly being mended by the simple, profound purity of her own. Julian watched from his car across the street as she brought the groceries inside, a small, sincere smile gracing her weary features. For the first time in 3 years, he felt a genuine, unburdened smile touch his own lips. His wealth, once a source of isolation and pain, now had a purpose. It was a tool to protect her, to nurture the goodness she had so freely given to him. He was just beginning. Julian knew he couldn't remain a shadow forever. His observation had morphed into a deep, undeniable need to be near her, to hear her voice, to see her gentle smile up close. He orchestrated a meeting with the precision of a corporate takeover. He learned from his investigators that she took Leo to a small, quiet park every afternoon, a small patch of green in their gray urban world. He shed the trappings of his billionaire identity, the impeccable suit, the commanding presence, the air of untouchable power. He dressed in simple, well-worn jeans and a soft sweater, his demeanor carefully calibrated to be unassuming, approachable. He looked like just another man seeking a moment of peace. He sat on a bench, pretending to read a book, his heart pounding with a nervous energy he hadn't felt since he was a teenager. He watched her push Leo on the swings, her face illuminated by the golden glow of the late afternoon sun. A quiet, tender laugh escaped her lips as Leo squealed with delight, and the sound was like music to Julian's soul. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated love. He waited for the right moment, then accidentally dropped his book as she walked past. He bent to retrieve it at the same time she did, their hands brushing for a fleeting, electric second. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice as gentle as he remembered. "No, my fault," he replied, his own voice sounding rougher than he'd intended. He looked up and met her gaze. Her eyes, which he had only seen filled with weariness or quiet resolve, now held a flicker of surprise, of warmth. They were even more beautiful than he had imagined. He introduced himself as Jay, a simple, anonymous name. He asked about her son, and she spoke of Leo with a fierce, tender pride that made Julian's chest ache. He found himself talking to her with an honesty and vulnerability he hadn't shared with anyone since his wife's death. He didn't speak of his company or his wealth. He spoke of books, of the changing seasons, of the simple pain of loneliness. He saw in her not a project or a test subject, but a kindred spirit, a soul who had known profound loss and had emerged not bitter, but gentle. She saw in him not a billionaire, but a kind, sad-eyed man who listened with an unwavering intensity that made her feel truly seen, truly heard. Their meetings in the park became a regular ritual, a sacred, unspoken appointment. They would sit on their bench and talk for hours while Leo played nearby. The quiet connection between them grew, a fragile tendril of hope in the barren landscapes of their respective griefs. One rainy afternoon, they took shelter in a small, quiet cafe. The air inside was warm, smelling of coffee and cinnamon. It was in this safe, amber-hued space that the walls around their hearts truly began to crumble. This was their confession scene. He started, telling her a veiled but emotionally true version of his story. He spoke of losing his family in an accident, of the cavernous silence they had left behind, of the feeling that his life had lost all meaning. His voice cracked, and a raw, unguarded pain shimmered in his eyes. Alara listened, her gaze steady and full of a deep, empathetic sadness. She didn't offer empty platitudes or cheap reassurances. Instead, when he had finished, she simply reached across the table and placed her hand gently over his. A simple, profound gesture of shared humanity. Then, she told him of her own husband, of his sudden illness, of the dreams they had built together that had vanished overnight. She spoke of her struggle to remain strong for Leo, of the crushing loneliness that sometimes threatened to swallow her whole. They sat in the soft hush of the cafe, two broken souls finding solace in the shared geography of their pain. A bond was forged between them, not over wealth or status, but over the sacred common ground of grief and resilience. He knew with an undeniable certainty that he was falling in love with her. Julian's feelings for Alara intensified with each passing day, solidifying into a fierce, protective love. He wanted to give her the world, but he started by wanting to give her one perfect evening, a single night of beauty and grace to erase the memory of her hardship. He was hosting his company's annual charity gala, a lavish affair attended by the city's elite. He arranged for a beautiful, elegant, but understated gown to be delivered to her apartment anonymously, along with a simple, handwritten note. "You deserve a beautiful night. Please be my guest." He also included a small, exquisite dress for Leo. Alara was hesitant, the world of galas and gowns feeling like a foreign country she had no passport for. But the sincerity of the gesture, and Leo's ecstatic excitement, convinced her to accept. When Julian arrived at her door to escort them, dressed in a simple but impeccably tailored suit, he gasped. The dress, a deep sapphire blue, shimmered under the dim hallway light, and it seemed to have been made for her. It didn't transform her. It simply highlighted the quiet, dignified beauty that had been there all along. For the first time, she looked at him and saw not just a kind friend, but a handsome, commanding man. A blush rose to her cheeks. She felt beautiful. She felt seen. The gala was held in a vast, ornate ballroom with a ceiling that soared 3 stories high, adorned with glittering crystal chandeliers. The air buzzed with the sound of champagne flutes, polite laughter, and the soft strains of a string quartet. Alara felt a wave of intimidation, but Julian stayed close by her side, his presence a warm, steady anchor in the overwhelming sea of wealth and power. For a while, the evening was magical. She and Julian danced, their bodies moving together with a natural, easy grace. He made her laugh, a genuine, carefree sound she hadn't made in years. She felt a lightness in her spirit, a hope for a future she hadn't dared to imagine. But the magic was about to be shattered. Across the polished marble floor, a pair of cold, cruel eyes had been watching them. It was Veronica, the impeccably dressed executive from the day of the test. She had failed Julian's character assessment spectacularly, her choice to purchase a limited edition sports car being seen as the final nail in the coffin of a potential partnership. Bitter and resentful, she had been searching for a way to undermine Julian Sterling, and now she saw her chance. She saw him fawning over a woman she recognized with a jolt of disbelief. The maid, the little charity case who had thrown her opportunity away. Veronica's lips twisted into a venomous sneer. She glided towards them, her movements sleek and predatory. Well, she began, her voice dripping with condescension, loud enough for those nearby to turn and listen. "I should have known. Julian Sterling has always had a taste for charity projects." Alara froze, her newfound happiness evaporating like mist. Julian's hand tightened protectively on her arm, his expression hardening into a mask of cold fury. Veronica directed her attack solely at Alara. "I remember you," she hissed, her eyes raking over Alara's dress with disdain. "The little maid. Did you steal that dress? Or did you use another one of Mr. Sterling's credit cards? I'm sure you're very good at spending other people's money on things that don't belong to you." The surrounding guests gasped, their faces a mixture of shock and cruel curiosity. The music faltered. A circle of silence formed around them. Alara felt 100 pairs of eyes on her, stripping her bare. The humiliation was a physical blow, hot and sharp. Her face went pale, her body trembled. She wanted the floor to swallow her whole. But even in her deepest shame, her dignity held. She lifted her chin, meeting Veronica's hateful gaze without flinching, though her own eyes glistened with unshed tears. Just as Veronica was about to deliver another verbal blow, Julian stepped forward, placing himself between the two women. His movement was calm, almost lazy, yet it radiated an aura of such commanding power that the entire ballroom seemed to hold its breath. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but it cut through the silence with the chilling precision of a shard of ice. "That is enough, Veronica." His eyes were glacial. Veronica faltered, taken aback by the sheer force of his quiet rage. Julian then turned his back on her, a gesture of ultimate dismissal, and faced the assembled guests. He took the microphone from the nearby podium. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice now resonating with calm authority through the ballroom's sound system. "For those of you who do not know me, my name is Julian Sterling." A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. The man they had known only as Jay was the reclusive, legendary billionaire himself. Tonight's gala is for a cause very close to my heart, celebrating true generosity of spirit, a quality that is, I have found, exceedingly rare. He turned and looked at Alara, his gaze softening with a profound tenderness that silenced the entire room. "This woman," he said, his voice ringing with conviction, "is Alara Vance, and she is the most profoundly generous person I have ever known." He then told them the story of the test, of the 4 credit cards, of the 3 women who had bought cars and jewelry and designer clothes. And then he told them what Alara had done. He told them how she, a single mother struggling to pay for her own child's medicine, had used a limitless fortune to buy antibiotics and a warm blanket for a sick, homeless stranger on a cold, rainy day. A stranger who was, in fact, him. A collective gasp echoed through the cavernous hall. He didn't spare a single detail, his words painting a vivid picture of her selfless, pure heart. "Veronica calls her a charity case," Julian concluded, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl as he finally turned his gaze back to her. "But I call her a hero. She possesses a wealth of character that you, Veronica, could not comprehend or purchase with 1,000 of my credit cards." He then delivered the final, devastating blow. Sterling Industries was to make a $5 million donation tonight. I have decided to double that amount. The full $10 million will be donated in Alara Vance's name, to a new foundation she will oversee, dedicated to providing aid to the city's most vulnerable. He took Alara's hand, lifting it to his lips and kissing it gently before the stunned, silent crowd. "She is not my guest here tonight," he declared, his eyes locking with hers. "She is my reason for being here. She is the reason for everything." The power dynamic was not just reversed. It was obliterated. Veronica stood speechless, her face a mask of pale, horrified shock. Alara stared at Julian, her heart thudding wildly, a whirlwind of disbelief, gratitude, and a dawning, brilliant hope swirling within her. He had not just saved her, he had honored her. In the quiet, cavernous interior of the sleek black limousine that spirited them away from the gala, the world outside blurred into a stream of glittering lights. Leo was asleep in the seat across from them, his small face peaceful, a soft smile on his lips. The adrenaline of the evening began to fade, leaving a heavy, unspoken tension in the air. Alara sat in a state of stunned silence, her mind struggling to process the seismic revelations of the past hour. The kind, gentle Jay she had come to care for was Julian Sterling, the powerful, enigmatic billionaire, the sick man on the street, her anonymous benefactor. It was all him. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place, forming a picture so overwhelming she could barely comprehend it. He had been watching her all along. He had orchestrated everything. She didn't know whether to feel grateful or betrayed. Julian watched the play of emotions on her face, the confusion, the hurt, the disbelief. He knew he had to tell her everything, to lay his soul bare before her and pray for her forgiveness and understanding. He took a deep breath. "Alara," he began, his voice soft in the plush silence of the car. "I know you have 1,000 questions, and you deserve the truth. All of it." He started from the beginning, his voice heavy with a grief he had never shared with another living soul. He told her about his wife, Amelia, and their daughter, Lily, and the car accident that had stolen them from him 3 years ago. He described the suffocating darkness that had followed, the profound cynicism that had taken root in his heart, making him believe that all human connection was transactional, that kindness was a myth. He confessed that the test had been a desperate, misguided attempt to prove his dark worldview correct. "I was a ghost, Alara," he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. "Just a hollow man rattling around in an empty life. I wanted you to fail the test. I wanted you to confirm that goodness wasn't real, so I could justify my own misery." He looked at her, his eyes glistening with raw, unshed tears. "But you didn't fail. You did the last thing on earth I expected. You showed me a light I had forgotten existed. In my darkest moment, you showed me grace." He then confessed to the secret interventions, firing her to isolate her, paying her debts, sending the groceries and the air purifier. "I know it was a deception," he said, his voice filled with self-recrimination. "And I am so sorry for the pain my actions caused you. I was clumsy. I was just a broken man trying to find a way to get close to the one person who had made him feel whole again." He reached out and took her hand, his touch gentle, tentative. "You didn't just save a stranger on the street that day, Alara. You saved me. You reawakened my heart. You gave me a reason to live again." The raw sincerity in his voice, the profound pain in his eyes, washed away her confusion and hurt, leaving only a deep, overflowing well of empathy. She saw not a manipulative billionaire, but a man shattered by grief, a man who had been just as lost and alone as she was. She tightened her grip on his hand, a silent message of forgiveness. He looked into her eyes, his own filled with a desperate, tender hope. "I know this is all too much too fast," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "But I can't hide it any longer. I've fallen in love with you, Alara. I love your strength, your dignity, your quiet resolve. I love your gentle heart. I don't want to be your secret savior anymore. I want to be your partner. I want to build a life with you and Leo, a life filled with light and laughter, not shadows." He paused, his heart in his throat. "I'm not offering you my wealth. I'm offering you my heart, what's left of it. And I'm praying you'll accept it." A single, cathartic tear slid down Alara's cheek. All the hardship, the loneliness, the quiet desperation of the past years seemed to melt away in the warmth of his gaze. In this man, she had found not just security, but a home for her weary soul. "Yes," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, Julian," the simple word was an absolution, a promise, a new beginning. He leaned in and kissed her, a kiss that was not about passion, but about a profound, sacred connection, a joining of two broken hearts finally, miraculously, made whole. 1 year later, the sun, a brilliant, golden orb, streamed down into a sprawling garden, illuminating a scene of idyllic peace. The relentless hammering of the rain had been replaced by the soft hush of a summer breeze rustling through the leaves of ancient oak trees. The biting cold of desperation had vanished, thawed by the steady warmth of love and security. Alara sat on a soft, woven blanket spread on the lush grass, her back resting against the sturdy trunk of a tree. The weary, haunted look was gone from her eyes. They were now clear and bright, shimmering with a deep, contented joy. She was no longer the virtuous sufferer, but a woman cherished and adored. A gentle, loving smile played on her lips as she watched Julian push a giggling Leo on a wooden swing hanging from a thick branch. Julian, the hidden savior, was hidden no more. The grief that had carved hollows into his handsome features had been softened by happiness. His laughter no longer a foreign sound but a rich, easy melody that filled the garden. He was no longer a ghost in his own life. He was a husband and a father. Leo's laughter pealed through the air, a pure, carefree sound, his breathing deep and untroubled. He was healthy, happy, and loved. The small, fragile family, forged in hardship and sealed by a selfless act of kindness, was now complete, a testament to the enduring power of a pure heart. Julian left the swing and walked over to Alara, sitting down beside her and wrapping a loving arm around her shoulders. He leaned in and gently kissed her, then placed a tender hand on her gently swelling abdomen. A new life, a new hope, was growing within her. They sat together in comfortable, profound silence, their life a quiet symphony of peace and gratitude. Their pasts were not forgotten, but the sharp edges of their shared griefs had been worn smooth by the steady, gentle tide of their love. They had found their happily ever after, not in a grand palace or in immense wealth, but in the simple, sacred space they had built together, a sanctuary of love in a world that had once been so cold. This story, at its core, is a timeless fable. It reminds us that in a world that often feels transactional and cold, an act of pure, selfless kindness can be a seismic event, capable of shattering the walls of grief and cynicism and creating a miracle. It shows us how a single, gentle soul, armed with nothing but her own unwavering dignity and compassion, could heal the shattered heart of a man who had everything and nothing at the same time. Their journey from shared loneliness to a shared life is a testament to the idea that our true wealth is not measured in dollars, but in the love we give and the compassion we show to others, especially when we expect nothing in return. If this story touched your heart and reaffirmed your faith in the quiet power of goodness, please let it be more than just a passing moment of inspiration. Let it be a reminder of the light we can all be in the world. Look around you, and you will see people struggling in their own quiet desperation. A small act of kindness, a warm word, a helping hand, a moment of genuine connection, can be the lifeline they need, can change their day, and as the story shows, it might just change your life too. For more soul-stirring tales of love, redemption, and the incredible strength of the human heart, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to Soulful Love Tales. We believe in the power of stories to heal, to inspire, and to connect us all. We'll see you in the next one.